The Mafia boss Alpha was supposed to claim Noah Vale before the entire pack, but halfway down the ceremonial aisle, Adrian Moretti stopped looking at the perfect Omega and turned toward the brother everyone had been trying to hide. For one impossible second, the Grand Hall forgot how to breathe. Noah stood beneath the silver claiming arch exactly where he was expected to be, dressed in white silk, his blonde hair brushed until it gleamed under the chandeliers. Every camera, every elder, every whispered marriage contract pointed toward him. Ethan Vale stood near the service doors in a plain gray jacket, holding a tray of untouched champagne glasses as if he belonged to the staff instead of the bloodline being celebrated. The difference was too deliberate to be accidental. Adrian noticed it before anyone else did. The Vale matriarch noticed him noticing. Her smile tightened. "Alpha Moretti," she said smoothly, stepping into his path. "Noah is waiting." Adrian did not move. His eyes remained on the quiet Omega at the edge of the room. Ethan lowered his gaze the instant their attention crossed, not shyly, but with the practiced speed of someone trained to disappear before being asked to. That single motion told Adrian more than any formal introduction. A hidden person did not flinch like that unless the hiding had consequences. Around the hall, packed guests began exchanging confused looks. Noah's perfect smile held, but his fingers curled once against the bouquet in his hand. The officiant cleared his throat. Adrian was 3 steps away from securing the most admired Omega alliance in the city, yet the only question cutting through his mind was why no one had introduced him to the man standing in plain sight. "Who is he?" Adrian asked. The matriarch's expression barely changed. "A household relative." His name. A pause. Too small for most people to hear. Too large for Adrian to ignore. "Ethan," she said. "Noah's younger brother." A ripple moved through the nearest guests. Younger brother. Not servant. Not distant cousin. Brother. Adrian looked again at Ethan's gray jacket, the tray in his hands, the way no seat had been reserved for him among the family row. Someone had not forgotten him. They had placed him where a guest might mistake him for background. Ethan's grip tightened around the tray until the crystal stems chimed softly. The sound drew a sharp glance from his mother. He immediately stilled. Adrian watched the entire exchange with a coldness settling behind his ribs. The wound was visible now, not in tears or words, but in reflex. Ethan expected correction for making noise while everyone else was allowed applause. "Why isn't he standing with your family?" Adrian asked. The matriarch laughed lightly, but the laughter died before reaching her eyes. "Ethan prefers quiet places. Noah was always the one suited for public life." Noah's smile brightened at exactly the right moment, flawless enough to make the crowd relax. But Ethan looked smaller with every word, as though each compliment for his brother pressed him closer to the wall. Adrian had seen men lie with guns pointed at them. This family lied with flowers, silk, and seating charts. Before he could ask another question, an elder approached with the ceremonial contract. "Alpha Moretti, if you would proceed, the pack witnesses are prepared." The contract was already opened to Noah's name. Adrian took it, scanned the page, then stopped. In the margin beside the family registry, a faint line of ink had been scraped almost clean. Not erased perfectly, hidden badly. He angled the document toward the light. Beneath the correction, another name had once been written first. Ethan Vale. The discovery changed the air around him. Adrian looked from the altered contract to Ethan, who had gone pale enough that the tray trembled again. He knew. Ethan knew his name had been removed, and he had still come to the ceremony carrying drinks for the people who erased him. "Interesting," Adrian said softly. The matriarch's hand shot out toward the contract. "That is an outdated draft." Adrian lifted it beyond her reach without looking away from Ethan. "Then why does he look afraid of it?" The hall fell quiet again, deeper this time. Ethan's lips parted, but no sound came. His mother turned toward him with a warning hidden inside a smile. "Ethan, dear, go help in the back." That command broke something small but unmistakable in Adrian's patience. He stepped away from the claiming arch, away from Noah, away from the path everyone had built for him. Every eye followed as the most dangerous alpha in the room walked toward the Omega no one had wanted seen. Ethan took one step back. Adrian stopped before him, close enough to see that his tray held 12 glasses and not a single one had been offered to him. "Were you invited to this ceremony?" Adrian asked quietly. "Or assigned to serve it?" Ethan swallowed. "I was told not to make trouble." Adrian's gaze sharpened. Behind him, Noah's perfect smile finally cracked. The matriarch whispered, "Alpha Moretti, this is not appropriate." Adrian reached out, not to touch Ethan, but to take the heavy tray from his shaking hands. The simple act made the entire hall stare. Power shifted so abruptly that even the chandeliers seemed to hold still. Adrian set the tray on a nearby table, then turned back toward the claiming arch where Noah waited beneath every expectation the pack had built. "No," Adrian said, loud enough for the room to hear. "What's inappropriate is asking me to choose from a lie." Before anyone could recover, he looked at Ethan again. "Tell me one thing. Why was your name on that contract before his?" Ethan's face went white. Across the hall, Noah whispered something no one else heard, but his mother heard it and turned on him with panic in her eyes. That panic answered more than Ethan's silence ever could. Adrian held the altered contract in one hand and looked at the hidden Omega standing before him. "I think," he said, "this ceremony just became honest." The altered contract never reached the elder's hands again because Adrian folded it once and slipped it into the inside pocket of his jacket before anyone could take it away. The movement was calm, almost casual, yet the entire hall reacted as if he had drawn a weapon. Ethan stood frozen beside the serving table, staring at the empty place where the champagne tray had rested, unsure whether he had just become the center of the ceremony or its next sacrifice. "Alpha Moretti," the Veil matriarch said, forcing another elegant smile. "There has clearly been a misunderstanding. Ethan has never participated in claiming negotiations." Adrian finally looked at her. "Then why was his name written on the contract before Noah's?" Her smile disappeared. Around them, conversations dissolved into uneasy whispers. The officiant glanced between the elders, silently asking whether the ceremony should continue, but none of them answered. Adrian had stopped following the script, and nobody seemed prepared for that. Ethan lowered his head. "Please don't do this because of me." His voice was so quiet Adrian almost missed it. "You'll embarrass everyone." Adrian studied him carefully. Ethan had not asked to be defended. He had asked Adrian to protect the people who had erased him. That told Adrian far more than another speech ever could. "Embarrassment isn't my concern," Adrian replied. "Truth is." Before anyone else could interrupt, he turned toward the oldest family steward. "Bring me every registry connected to the Veil household." The steward hesitated only a second before looking toward the matriarch instead of Adrian. That hesitation was all the evidence Adrian needed. "Interesting," Adrian murmured. "I gave the order, yet you waited for someone else." Color drained from the steward's face. I only wish to confirm." "No," Adrian cut in evenly. "You wish to protect someone." The room grew quieter still. The steward hurried away, but Adrian noticed the brief glance he exchanged with Noah before leaving. It lasted less than a heartbeat, yet it carried fear instead of confidence. Noah remained beneath the claiming arch, perfectly composed for the crowd, but his fingers tightened around the bouquet until several white petals drifted onto the polished floor. Adrian watched him without hostility. Noah looked less like a victorious Omega than someone desperately trying not to disappoint invisible expectations. That contradiction settled uncomfortably in Adrian's mind. A servant suddenly rushed across the hall carrying a stack of guest books. As he hurried past Ethan, one ledger slipped free and crashed onto the marble floor. Loose pages scattered everywhere. Ethan reacted instantly, kneeling before. Anyone else moved. Instead of grabbing the nearest papers, he carefully sorted them into separate piles, returning every page to its correct order from memory. "These belong together," he whispered to the flustered servant. "The attendance list starts after the donor records." The servant blinked in surprise. "How did you know?" Ethan looked embarrassed by the question. "I organized them last week." Adrian crouched beside the scattered pages and picked up one sheet. "You prepared the ceremony?" Ethan immediately shook his head. "Only the paperwork." "Who designed the seating plan?" Silence. "Who arranged the donations?" Another pause. "Who coordinated the security routes?" Ethan slowly looked away. The servant answered instead. "He did, Alpha." The hall stirred again. Adrian stood, still holding the ledger. "So Ethan organized the ceremony honoring Noah." No one denied it. The contradiction struck the guests harder than any accusation. Several pack representatives exchanged puzzled glances as the image of the invisible brother quietly holding together the family's greatest celebration spread through the room. At that moment, the steward returned carrying 3 leather-bound family registries. "Here, Alpha." Adrian opened the newest volume first. Noah's achievements filled page after page with photographs, awards, interviews, and public ceremonies. Ethan appeared nowhere. He opened an older registry. Still nothing. Then he reached the oldest volume. Near the back, pressed almost flat between faded pages, rested a childhood photograph of 2 young Omega brothers planting a tree together. Ethan smiled openly in the picture while Noah laughed beside him. Someone had drawn a thin line through Ethan's face in dark ink years earlier. Adrian stared at the image for several silent seconds. "Who marked this?" Nobody answered. Ethan quietly spoke instead. "It doesn't matter anymore." Adrian looked at him. "It mattered enough for someone to erase you." Ethan instinctively reached for the photograph before stopping himself halfway. As though he had remembered, he was no longer allowed to touch his own family's history. Adrian noticed the hesitation. Another habit built by years of exclusion. The elder finally stepped forward. "Alpha Moretti," he announced firmly. "The claiming ceremony must proceed. The pact cannot wait while private family matters are discussed." Adrian closed the registry. This stopped being private the moment an official contract was altered. The elder frowned. "Without proof, these are assumptions." "You're right." Adrian's voice remained perfectly calm. "Which is why the ceremony is postponed until I see every original household record." Gasps echoed across the hall. Postponing a public claiming between 2 major families was nearly unthinkable. The matriarch stepped forward in open panic. "You cannot delay this over one forgotten brother." Adrian turned slowly toward her. "Forgotten people don't accidentally appear beneath erased ink, altered contracts, missing photographs, and hidden records." No one spoke. Even Noah looked at his mother now, confusion replacing confidence. Adrian walked toward the grand doors, then stopped beside Ethan once more. "Tomorrow morning," he said quietly enough for only Ethan to hear. "I want you to show me everything they hoped I would never see." Ethan stared at him, unable to answer. Behind them, the ceremony collapsed into frightened arguments as alliances fractured faster than anyone expected. But Adrian never looked back. He had arrived believing the most important choice of the day was which Omega to claim. He left realizing the real question was who had spent years making sure Ethan would never even be considered. By sunrise, the Vale estate no longer looked like a house preparing for celebration. It looked like a crime scene dressed in flowers. Servants moved in frightened silence through corridors still decorated with white ribbons for Noah's postponed claiming, while pack representatives lingered behind closed doors, whispering about Adrian Moretti's insult, the altered contract, and the hidden brother whose name had suddenly become more dangerous than anyone expected. Ethan waited outside the family archive with both hands folded tightly in front of him. He had not slept. Adrian could see it in the careful stillness of his shoulders, the pale exhaustion beneath his eyes, and the way he stood half a step away from the door, as though even now he expected to be told he had no right to enter. "You said you wanted to see everything," Ethan said quietly when Adrian approached. "I did." Ethan looked toward the hallway, where 2 Vale guards pretended not to listen. "My mother will say I'm confused." "Are you?" Ethan almost smiled. "No, that's why she'll say it." Adrian held out the archive key the steward had surrendered before dawn. "Then open it." Ethan stared at the key as though it weighed more than metal should. For one long second, he did not take it. Then he reached forward, unlocked the archive himself, and stepped into a room full of shelves, boxes, ceremony albums, family records, and proof arranged neatly enough to look innocent. Adrian followed. Ethan went directly to the lowest cabinet, the one nearly hidden behind stacked floral arrangements waiting for Noah's celebration. He pulled out a slim wooden box. Inside were thank you letters, household budgets, old event plans, and donation receipts. None bore Ethan's name on the outside. All were written in his handwriting. Adrian picked up the first letter. It thanked the Vale family for funding an orphanage winter program. The public announcement had praised Noah. The planning notes beneath it were Ethan's. Another folder showed a scholarship dinner. Noah had given the speech. Ethan had organized the donors. A third showed emergency relief supplies after a fire. Noah's picture appeared in the newspaper. Ethan's initials appeared in the inventory list. How many? Adrian asked. Ethan looked down. I stopped counting. The answer was too familiar. Not dramatic. Not angry. Just tired. Adrian closed the folder slowly. Why let him take credit? Ethan's fingers brushed one torn envelope before pulling away. Because people listen when Noah speaks. If my name helped less, and his name helped more, then it seemed selfish to care. Adrian looked at him then, not with pity, but with a sharper kind of respect. Ethan had not hidden because he had nothing to offer. He had been taught that offering himself without recognition was the only acceptable form of value. Before Adrian could speak, footsteps stopped outside the archive. Noah stood in the doorway, no longer dressed in ceremonial white, but in a simple cream coat, his perfect appearance slightly undone. Mother is looking for you, he said to Ethan. Ethan immediately stepped back from the box. Adrian noticed. Noah noticed too. Something painful moved through Noah's expression before he covered it. She said, you're upsetting the guests. Ethan's voice became smaller. I'm sorry. Adrian turned toward Noah. For what? Noah looked at him. Excuse me. What is he apologizing for? Noah had no answer. That silence was more honest than anything he had said at the ceremony. Adrian lifted the folder from the relief program. Did you know Ethan planned this? Noah's face changed. Not surprise. Shame. I knew he helped. Helped? Adrian opened another file. He coordinated the donors, supply routes, and budget. You stood on a stage. Noah's jaw tightened, but not with anger at Ethan. That was how it worked. Who decided that? Ethan spoke before Noah could. It doesn't matter. Adrian's gaze remained on Noah. It matters to me. Noah looked between them, and for the first time, the perfect Omega seemed less like a rival and more like a man trapped inside a roll polished too tightly to breathe. Mother said public attention would hurt him, Noah said quietly. She said Ethan wasn't suited for scrutiny, that he would embarrass himself, that people would be cruel. Ethan's hand closed around the edge of the wooden box. They were cruel anyway. Noah flinched. The words had not been loud, but they landed with years behind them. Adrian saw it happen. One brother finally speaking from the edge, the other finally forced to hear what perfection had cost. The moment broke when a Vale guard entered without knocking. Mr. Ethan Vale, he said stiffly, avoiding Adrian's eyes. The matriarch requests your presence downstairs. Immediately. It was not a request. Noah straightened. I'll take him. Adrian stepped in front of Ethan before either brother moved. No, the guard stiffened. This is a family matter. Adrian held up the folder. Not anymore. His voice carried into the corridor, drawing servants, guards, and two-pack observers toward the open doorway. Every record in this room becomes evidence until I decide otherwise. The guard's face tightened. Evidence of what? Adrian looked at the box in Ethan's hands, then at the erased photographs lining the shelf behind him, of a family that built one son into a symbol by turning the other into a shadow. No one spoke. Ethan stared at Adrian as if he could not decide whether the words freed him or endangered him. Then, from the far end of the corridor, the Vale matriarch's voice cut through the silence like glass. How touching. She walked toward them with a smile that made every servant lower their head. But if Alpha Moretti wants truth, perhaps he should ask why Ethan agreed to disappear in the first place. Ethan went completely still. Noah turned pale. Adrian looked at Ethan, but Ethan did not look back. And in that silence, Adrian understood that the hidden file was not the darkest secret in the house. The Vale matriarch's smile never faltered, but the servants nearest the archive quietly stepped backward as if they already knew what came next would stain every polished hallway more deeply than spilled blood. Ethan stood motionless beside the open cabinet, the wooden box still in his hands, while Noah stared at their mother with growing uncertainty. Adrian watched all three without speaking. People often revealed more when silence forced them to fill it. You asked why Ethan disappeared, the matriarch said smoothly. Because he agreed it was best for everyone. Ethan lowered his eyes. That's enough, he murmured. Adrian ignored the interruption. Best for whom? The answer came immediately. For this family. She walked into the archive as though she still owned every truth inside it. Noah was always comfortable before crowds. Ethan wasn't. One son inspired confidence. The other preferred shadows. Adrian reached toward one of the shelves and removed another leather binder. This one contained planning notes for charity galas held over the past decade. Every page carried Noah's signature on the front. Every draft beneath it had Ethan's handwriting, filling the margins with corrections. Schedules, seating arrangements, donor confirmations, and emergency contingency plans. Interesting, Adrian said quietly. One brother signs. The other builds. The matriarch's expression hardened for the first time. Leadership requires different talents. Then why erase the builder? She did not answer. Instead, she turned toward Ethan. Tell him why you stopped attending public events. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. A memory flashed across his face before disappearing almost as quickly. It doesn't matter. It matters now, Adrian said. Ethan inhaled slowly. When I was 16, I spoke during a charity dinner because Noah became ill. Afterward, investors congratulated me instead of him. The room fell silent. Mother said it created confusion. Noah looked at Ethan in disbelief. You never told me that. Ethan gave a tired smile that carried no resentment. You were recovering. There didn't seem to be any reason. The matriarch folded her hands. Our alliances depended on consistency. One public face. One future Omega. We corrected a mistake before rumors spread. Adrian looked around the archive again. Photographs without Ethan. Invitations without Ethan. Awards carrying Noah's name over Ethan's work. Suddenly, every missing detail fit together. This had never been neglect. It had been maintenance. So every time Ethan succeeded, Adrian asked, You removed him? We protected stability. You protected a narrative. Before she could reply, one of the pack observers stepped into the archive holding several framed photographs removed from the downstairs gallery. Alpha, he said carefully, you requested every family display. Adrian accepted the frames. The first showed Noah opening a children's clinic. Ethan was missing. The second showed Noah leading a relief convoy. Ethan was missing again. The third drew Adrian's attention immediately. In the corner of the original print, beneath poorly matched paint, the outline of another shoulder remained visible. Someone had literally painted Ethan out of the family portrait. Adrian turned the frame toward the window. The hidden figure became unmistakable. Noah stared at it in shock. I never knew. His voice cracked under the weight of the discovery. The matriarch reached for the frame. Adrian stepped back before she could touch it. How many? He asked. She stayed silent. How many photographs? Silence. How many records? Silence again. How many years? Ethan answered instead. Almost 12. Adrian slowly lowered the frame. 12 years. 12 years of teaching one brother to shine by teaching the other not to exist. The realization settled over everyone present like cold rain. Even the guards avoided looking at Ethan now. They had escorted him through these halls for years without ever wondering why every celebration somehow happened around him instead of with him. Noah walked toward the painted photograph with trembling hands. Mother, he whispered, did you really do this? She met his gaze without apology. I did what was necessary to secure your future. By stealing his? Noah's question echoed through the archive. She did not answer because she could not. Adrian watched Noah carefully. There was grief in his face, not triumph. Whatever role Noah had played, he had not fully understood its cost. That mattered. It changed the shape of the conflict. Ethan quietly picked up the painted photograph after Adrian handed it to him. His thumb brushed the faint outline where his younger face had once been visible. I remember this day, he said softly. We planted that oak tree together. Noah swallowed hard. You gave me the shovel because I couldn't lift it. Ethan nodded once. You laughed when we both fell into the mud. For the first time since Adrian arrived, the brothers shared the same memory instead of opposite versions of history. The moment lasted only seconds before hurried footsteps broke it apart. Captain Rowan Hale, Adrian's chief of security, entered the archive carrying a sealed envelope. Alpha. Adrian accepted it and broke the seal. Inside was a formal notice from the Pack Council ordering the claiming ceremony to resume before sunset, warning that postponement would be interpreted as disrespect toward every allied family. Attached beneath it was a second document signed by several influential elders urging Adrian to proceed with Noah immediately to preserve stability. Adrian folded both papers without changing expression. So they've chosen a side. Captain Hale nodded. They're already gathering downstairs. Ethan's face lost what little color remained. You should go, he whispered. If they think I'm the reason. Adrian looked directly at him. You still believe this is your fault. Ethan said nothing because the silence itself was answer enough. Adrian slipped the painted photograph into the same inside pocket that already held the altered contract. 2 pieces of evidence. 2 lies preserved by powerful people. Then he turned toward the archive door. Tell the council, he said to Captain Hale, that I'll attend. Ethan looked up hopefully, then immediately looked away again, convinced he already knew how the day would end. Adrian took 1 step into the corridor before stopping beside him. One more question, he said quietly. Ethan waited. Adrian's voice remained calm, but every word carried weight. If you were never meant to stand beside your brother, why was your name written first on the original claiming contract? Ethan's breathing stopped. Across the room, the matriarch closed her eyes for the briefest instant. And Adrian realized the answer to that single question threatened far more than a family's reputation. The answer to Adrian's question was waiting in the oldest version of the contract, hidden beneath 12 years of polished lies. Captain Hale found it in the archive safe behind 3 decoy folders, sealed with the Vale crest and stamped with the original date of negotiation. No one spoke while Adrian opened it. Even the Vale matriarch, who had controlled every conversation since the ceremony began, looked suddenly still. The first page listed the terms of alliance between the Moretti pack and the Vale family. The second page listed the intended Omega candidate. Ethan Vale. Not Noah. Not as a substitute. Not as a mistake. Ethan's name had been written first, approved first, and witnessed first. Adrian lifted the document into the light. Explain. The matriarch's mouth tightened. Old negotiations are rarely final. This one was signed. Noah stepped closer, reading. Over Adrian's shoulder, and all color drained from his face. Mother, why was Ethan chosen? Ethan did not move. He looked less shocked than resigned, as though some buried part of him had always known the truth but had never been allowed to touch it. The matriarch looked at Noah, not Ethan. Because the Moretti advisors requested an Omega with administrative intelligence, emotional restraint, and proven crisis management. At the time, your brother fit their criteria. The words were almost complimentary. That made them worse. For years, Ethan had been called unsuitable in public while his exact strengths had made him valuable in private. Adrian's eyes remained cold. Then why change the candidate? Silence pressed against the archive walls. Finally, the matriarch answered. Because Ethan made people uncomfortable. Ethan's fingers curled around the painted photograph still in his hands. I asked too many questions, he said softly. Adrian looked at him. Ethan swallowed. About the family accounts. About donor money. About why some alliances required promises that weren't written down. Noah turned sharply. You knew about that? I noticed patterns. Ethan's voice stayed quiet. I was told noticing was not an Omega's duty. The reframe settled into place with brutal clarity. Ethan had not been hidden because he lacked polish. He had been hidden because he saw too much, remembered too much, and cared too little for the family's perfect image to stay useful as decoration. Noah's perfection had been safe because it was visible, charming, and controllable. Ethan's value had been dangerous because it came with truth. Adrian opened the final page of the contract. In the margin, beside Ethan's name, someone had written one sentence in dark ink. Replace with Noah. Easier to manage. Noah read it and took one step back as if struck. Easier to manage, he repeated, barely audible. The matriarch's expression hardened. I secured this family. You buried your son, Adrian said. I protected both of them. Her composure finally cracked. Noah would have been devoured by public pressure without a clear path. Ethan would have ruined every alliance by refusing to smile. Through what needed to be done, I chose the son who could survive the spotlight. Ethan gave a small, exhausted laugh. No, you chose the son who would obey it. Noah flinched, but he did not deny it. That was the moment the story changed for everyone in the room. The perfect Omega was not simply the favored brother. He was also the acceptable mask. Ethan was not the shadow because he failed. He was the shadow because the truth attached to him threatened too many people standing in the light. A knock sounded at the archive door before anyone could speak again. One of the pack observers entered, face tense. Alpha Moretti, the council is assembled downstairs. They're demanding your answer before sunset. Adrian folded the original contract and placed it beside the painted photograph and the altered copy from the ceremony. 3 pieces of evidence. 3 versions of the same lie. The matriarch lifted her chin. If you choose to humiliate this family publicly, the alliance collapses. Adrian looked at her. If an alliance requires me to pretend not to see the truth, it was already rotten. Ethan finally turned to him. Don't do this for me. Adrian's expression softened only slightly. I'm not. Pain crossed Ethan's face before Adrian continued. I'm doing this because every person in that hall deserves to know what they were really asked to applaud. Ethan's breath caught. For the first time, the answer did not make him smaller. It made him afraid in a different way. The kind of fear that comes when the door opens and hiding is no longer the only way to survive. Downstairs, the ceremonial bell rang once, calling the pack back to witness the claiming everyone still believed would restore order. Adrian looked at Ethan, then at Noah. The ceremony continues, he said. Noah's shoulders tensed. Ethan lowered his eyes. The matriarch smiled in relief too soon. Adrian picked up the original contract. But this time, he said, walking toward the door, we used the first version. The matriarch's smile vanished. Ethan stood frozen in the archive while the sound of gathering voices rose from below, louder with every passing second. Adrian had not claimed him yet. He had done something more dangerous. He had decided the entire pack would hear why Ethan had been hidden before they watched whether he was chosen. The pack council chamber was already full when Adrian entered, yet every conversation died the moment the original contract appeared in his hand. The elders sat beneath the carved emblems of every allied family. Noah stood beside his mother with a face drained of certainty, and Ethan remained near the entrance where he instinctively chose the least noticeable place in the room. No one had told him to stand there. Years of being hidden had done that for them. Adrian walked past the ceremonial platform without taking his seat. Instead, he placed 3 items on the central table one after another. The altered contract from the ceremony, the painted family photograph with Ethan erased from it, and finally the original agreement naming Ethan as the intended Omega. The silence that followed was heavier than any accusation. Before anyone asks me to continue yesterday's ceremony, Adrian said evenly, everyone here deserves to know what ceremony I was actually invited to. An elder reached for the oldest contract, reading only the first page before his expression changed. This cannot be correct. It is, Captain Hale answered before Adrian needed to. The seals are authentic. The signatures match the archives. Nothing has been forged. Murmurs spread across the chamber. Several allied leaders turned toward the Veil matriarch, waiting for a denial that never came. Instead, she lifted her chin with the composure of someone who had defended her choices for too many years to retreat now. The agreement was revised for the good of both families. Adrian looked directly at her. Without informing mine. Circumstances changed. The truth changed, Adrian corrected. Your version of it. Noah finally stepped forward. Mother, did father know? The question struck harder than any accusation. For the first time, uncertainty crossed the matriarch's face. Your father trusted my judgment. That isn't what I asked. She remained silent. Noah slowly lowered his eyes. The answer was obvious enough. Adrian noticed Ethan quietly, backing another step toward the exit. Even now, while the lies collapsed around him, his first instinct was to disappear before becoming an inconvenience. Adrian spoke without turning around. Stay. Ethan froze. One simple word. No command. No threat. Just permission not to leave. Ethan obeyed almost unconsciously. One of the senior elders cleared his throat. Alpha Moretti, regardless of past administrative mistakes, the council must resolve today's alliance. Stability affects every pack represented here. Adrian nodded once. Then let's discuss stability. He lifted the painted photograph. For 12 years, this family removed Ethan from records, ceremonies, charitable work, and public recognition. He placed it beside the altered contract. His name was erased from legal documents. Then he rested his hand on the original agreement. And the Omega originally chosen by both families was replaced in secret because he was considered easier to hide than to control. Several council members exchanged uneasy glances. None challenged the evidence. Adrian continued, if any alliance in this chamber depends upon deception, then none of us are negotiating honestly. Before another elder could respond, Ethan quietly spoke. Please stop. Every head turned toward him. Ethan swallowed hard. This isn't helping anyone. Adrian studied him carefully. Why do you think that? Because people will suffer. Who? Ethan hesitated. Noah. Noah looked at his brother in stunned silence. Ethan continued. He didn't erase me. He believed what he was told. The room shifted again. Adrian had expected resentment. Instead, Ethan offered protection to the brother who had unknowingly stood where he once belonged. Noah closed his eyes briefly before walking toward Ethan. I should have asked more questions, he admitted quietly. I saw pieces of this for years and convinced myself there had to be explanations. Ethan managed a faint smile. There always were explanations. Not good ones. The brothers stood facing each other, neither victorious nor defeated, only exhausted by a truth that had stolen years from both of them. The moment was interrupted by the Veil matriarch's sharp voice. Enough sentiment. She turned toward the council. Whether mistakes were made is irrelevant. The Moretti alliance was rebuilt around Noah years ago. Undoing that decision now would embarrass every family present. Adrian answered before anyone else could. You're still talking about appearances. Appearances preserve power. No, Adrian replied calmly. Truth preserves trust. Another elder leaned forward. If you reject Noah publicly after these revelations, every alliance represented here may fracture. Adrian looked around the chamber. Then perhaps alliances that survive only by rewarding lies deserve to fracture. The warning landed harder than anyone expected. Several younger leaders lowered their eyes. Others looked toward the evidence again, no longer comfortable defending the Veil position. The balance of power had begun to move. Captain Hale stepped beside Adrian and quietly handed him another folder recovered from the archives only minutes earlier. Adrian opened it, scanned the contents, then looked toward Ethan. You organized relief funds after the Blackridge warehouse fire? Ethan blinked in surprise. Yes. The public believed Noah coordinated the rescue. Ethan nodded once. That was the announcement. Adrian closed the folder. 23 workers survived because you rerouted supply convoys before the bridge collapsed. Ethan looked almost embarrassed. Anyone would have. No, Adrian said. The reports say no one else even saw the bridge was unstable. The chamber fell silent again. This time the silence belonged entirely to Ethan. One elder slowly removed his glasses. Another reopened the original contract. The narrative everyone had accepted for years was breaking apart piece by piece, replaced by evidence no speech could erase. Adrian looked toward the ceremonial doors where attendants waited for the claiming ceremony. The words hit the chamber like a lit match dropped into oil. The hidden archives are on fire. For one heartbeat, no one moved. Then the council erupted. Elders rose from their seats, attendants ran toward the doors, and the Veil matriarch's face went perfectly blank in the way guilty people sometimes looked when panic arrived too early. Ethan was the only one who did not turn toward the smoke-darkened windows. He looked at Noah. Noah looked back. Something passed between the brothers, recognition, fear, and the terrible understanding that whatever was burning belonged to both of them. Adrian moved first. Seal the exits, he ordered Captain Hale. No one leaves this chamber without my permission. The eldest elder slammed a hand on the table. Alpha Moretti, the archives are burning. Exactly, Adrian said. And fires do not usually begin themselves at the precise moment evidence becomes inconvenient. The chamber fell silent again, sharper than before. Outside, the distant alarm bells began to ring through the estate. Ethan stepped forward, face pale. The lower archive has old paper, but the hidden room is stone. If there's a fire there, someone opened it. Adrian looked at him. You know the room? Ethan hesitated. I found it once. Years ago. The Veil matriarch snapped. Ethan. The single word carried 12 years of training. Ethan flinched, but this time he did not step back. Adrian saw the struggle in him. The old instinct to obey, the new possibility of being heard. What did you find? Adrian asked. Ethan swallowed. Duplicates. Original donor ledgers. Early alliance drafts. Things Mother said were destroyed. Noah went rigid. There were duplicates? Ethan nodded. I copied some before they locked the room. The room changed again. Every person who had dismissed Ethan as ornamental now looked at him as if he had become the only map through a collapsing building. Adrian did not waste another second. Show me. They moved through the eastern corridor with guards ahead and behind them, the council forced to remain under watch while smoke gathered along the ceiling like a dark warning. Ethan walked fast despite the tremor in his hands. Adrian stayed beside him, close enough to protect, but not so close that it felt like control. Halfway down the stairs, Ethan stopped before a plain storage door hidden behind crates of unused ceremonial flowers. Heat seeped through the cracks. "There," he said. Captain Hale reached for the handle, but Ethan caught his wrist. "Not that lock." Hale paused. Ethan dropped to his knees, pushed aside a loose stone near the floor, and pulled out a narrow iron lever no one else had noticed. When he twisted it, a second latch released inside the wall. Adrian stared at him. "You remembered that?" Ethan gave a faint, humorless smile. Hidden things remember hidden doors. The door opened into smoke. Adrian pulled Ethan back before he could step inside, but Ethan shook his head. "The duplicate box is beneath the left shelf. If it burns, they'll say everything else was forged. Then I go. You won't know which one." The fire crackled louder beyond the doorway. A beam collapsed somewhere inside with a sound like splitting bone. Noah arrived behind them, breathless, his perfect coat stained with ash from the corridor. "I know the family seal boxes," he said. Ethan turned in surprise. Noah met his eyes. "You know the hidden room. I know what Mother kept locked." For the first time, they were not the perfect brother and the hidden one. They were two sons staring at the same burning inheritance. Adrian made the decision instantly. "Hale, 2 guards with me. Ethan tells us where." Noah identifies the box. "No one plays hero." Ethan almost argued. Adrian looked at him. "That includes you." Ethan's mouth closed. Not because he was silenced, but because someone had included him in the plan instead of dismissing him from it. They entered low under the smoke. The archive room glowed orange at the far wall where curtains had been deliberately soaked and lit. Not an accident. The fire had been placed to travel across the record shelves first. Ethan coughed and pointed left. "Bottom shelf. Behind the false panel." Noah shoved aside a crate, burned his hand on the metal latch, and hissed through his teeth before pulling free a black cedar box stamped with the Old Vale crest. Adrian grabbed it, but the lid fell open from heat-damaged hinges. Inside lay contracts, photographs, donor books, sealed letters, and a narrow bundle tied with blue ribbon. On top was a document labeled, "Original Omega Assessment, Ethan Vale." Before Adrian could close the box, another paper slipped loose and fell at his feet. Noah picked it up. His face changed. "What is it?" Ethan asked. Noah stared at the page as if the fire had reached something inside him. "It's my assessment." Adrian took the paper and read the first lines. Noah Vale, socially ideal, publicly appealing, emotionally compliant. Suitable for symbolic alliance. Ethan Vale, superior strategic judgment, unsuitable for manipulation. Recommended removal from public candidacy. The fire roared behind them, but no one moved for one devastating second. The truth was no longer implied. It was written plainly in the family's own hand. Ethan had not been hidden because he was fragile. He had been hidden because he could not be controlled. Noah had not been chosen because he was better. He had been chosen because he would obey. Noah's voice broke first. "I was the easier son." Ethan reached for him instinctively. "Noah." A shelf crashed down, sparks exploding across the floor. Adrian shoved both brothers toward the exit as Hale and the guards dragged the box through the smoke. They stumbled back into the corridor coughing, covered in ash, alive, and carrying the one thing someone had tried to erase. At the top of the stairs, the Vale matriarch stood between 2 guards, her face as pale as marble. Her eyes went not to Ethan, not to Noah, but to the cedar box in Adrian's hands. That glance condemned her more completely than a confession. Ethan saw it too. Something in him seemed to fold inward. "She'll never stop," he whispered. Adrian turned toward him. "Then we stop letting her decide where you stand." But Ethan was already looking past him toward the open doors of the estate, toward the crowd waiting for a ceremony that had turned into judgment. "No," he said quietly. "If I stay, she'll burn everything around me." Adrian stepped closer. "Ethan." Ethan looked at him then, and the wound Adrian had been circling all along finally spoke through his eyes. "Noah is safer for you. For the pack. For everyone." Before Adrian could answer, Ethan pressed the smoke-stained blue ribbon from the evidence bundle into his hand and stepped back. "Use the proof," he whispered. "Just don't use me." Then, while the guards turned toward the renewed alarm below, Ethan slipped through the side corridor and disappeared into the smoke-filled estate before anyone could stop him. By the time Adrian realized Ethan was gone, The estate had already become a maze of smoke, frightened guests, and shouting guards. The blue ribbon Ethan had pressed into his hand remained wrapped around Adrian's fingers like a silent promise he refused to break. Captain Hale moved beside him. "We've secured every gate," he reported. No sign of Ethan. Adrian looked toward the open courtyard where ash drifted across the marble like gray snow. "He's not trying to escape," he said quietly. "He's trying to remove himself." Noah heard him. His shoulders sagged with painful understanding. "That's what he's always done." Adrian turned sharply. "Then tell me where he goes when he believes he doesn't deserve to be found." Noah closed his eyes for only a moment before answering. "The old oak tree." Adrian did not ask why. He already remembered the erased childhood photograph from the archive, the one where two brothers had planted a tree together before one of them was painted out of history. They crossed the estate gardens at a run. The celebration banners still hung untouched above empty pathways, fluttering over a wedding that no longer existed. Beyond the gardens stood the enormous oak, its branches stretching over the hillside exactly as it had in the faded photograph. Ethan sat beneath it with his back against the trunk, still wearing smoke-stained clothes, staring at the blackened marks on his hands where ash had settled into the lines of his skin. He did not look surprised when Adrian approached. "I knew you'd find this place," Ethan said softly. Adrian stopped a few feet away. "Then why run?" Ethan smiled without humor. "Because finding me isn't the same as choosing me." Noah remained behind Adrian, unable to speak. Ethan looked at the tree above them. "We planted it together. Mother said it would remind us that brothers always grow in the same direction." He laughed once, quietly. "Then she spent 12 years cutting one branch away." Adrian stepped closer. "She didn't succeed." Ethan finally met his eyes. "Didn't she?" Before Adrian could answer, footsteps echoed across the garden. The pack council, escorted by guards, emerged onto the path, followed by allied leaders, servants, and finally the Vale matriarch herself. The entire estate had followed the search. Hundreds of eyes settled upon the hidden Omega beneath the oak tree. Ethan instinctively stood. His first movement was not toward Adrian. It was backward, away from everyone. "Please," he whispered, "don't make this harder." Adrian looked around at the gathered crowd. Every lie had already been exposed. Every document had already been recovered. One final choice remained. The council elder stepped forward. "Alpha Moretti," he announced. "The alliance must be concluded today. Before every witness present, choose your intended Omega." The garden became perfectly silent. Noah slowly walked away from the ceremonial path and stopped beside Ethan instead of across from him. It was the first public choice he had ever made that was entirely his own. He faced the crowd. "Before anyone waits for Adrian's decision," Noah said, his voice shaking but clear, "I need to make mine." His mother stared at him. "Noah," he did not look at her. "Everything I accepted belonged to my brother first. His work, his place, even the future everyone promised me." He turned toward Ethan. "I didn't know all of it, but I knew enough to ask questions, and I chose comfort instead." Tears filled Ethan's eyes immediately. Noah continued, "I'm sorry that I let you disappear, because it was easier to believe the story than to search for the truth." Ethan shook his head, unable to answer. Adrian watched the brothers carefully. The wound dividing them was finally being spoken aloud instead of managed in silence. Then the matriarch stepped forward. "Enough." Her voice cut through the garden. "Noah, stand beside your alpha." Noah remained where he was. "No." It was a single word, but it shattered the last piece of her authority over him. Adrian took one step toward Ethan. The council watched without breathing. "Yesterday," Adrian said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I believed I had come here to choose between two Omegas." He held up the original contract in one hand and the painted photograph in the other. "Today I understand there was never a choice between brothers. There was only a choice between accepting a lie or standing beside the truth." Ethan's breathing became uneven. "Adrian." Adrian closed the remaining distance between them. "You asked me not to use you." Ethan lowered his eyes. "Because you'll lose alliances. Then they were never worth keeping." He placed the painted childhood photograph into Ethan's hands. "You asked me to use the proof instead." Ethan nodded faintly. Adrian smiled for the first time since entering the Vale estate. "The proof brought me here." Then, before the entire pack, Adrian removed the ceremonial claiming mark from around his own wrist, the symbol prepared for Noah since the beginning of the alliance, and held it toward Ethan instead. Gasps swept across the crowd. The council elder looked stunned. The Vale matriarch took one desperate step forward before Captain Hale blocked her path. Ethan stared at the claiming mark, unable to lift his hand. "I don't know how to stand where I've never been allowed to stand," he whispered. Adrian answered without hesitation. "Then don't stand there alone." Ethan slowly raised trembling fingers. Just before they touched the claiming mark, a sharp voice rang out across the garden. "If he accepts," the Vale matriarch declared, "I'll reveal the one secret Ethan has hidden from every one of you, including his alpha." Ethan's hand stopped inches from Adrian's. Every face in the garden turned toward the matriarch. Ethan closed his eyes, and for the first time since Adrian had met him, genuine fear, not quiet sadness, not resignation, but absolute fear, crossed his face. The matriarch's threat froze the garden more completely than the fire ever had. Ethan's hand remained suspended inches from the claiming mark, close enough to choose, too frightened to touch it. Adrian did not look at the matriarch. He looked at Ethan. "Is it true?" Ethan's throat moved. "Yes." A ripple spread through the pack, but Adrian's voice stayed quiet. "Is it something you did to hurt someone?" Ethan shook his head immediately. "No, then she doesn't get to use it like a weapon." The matriarch laughed. Once, sharp and triumphant. "How noble. Shall I tell them then? Shall I explain that your hidden Omega has spent years secretly redirecting family funds?" Several elders stiffened. Noah stepped forward. "Mother, stop." No, her eyes burned now, all elegance stripped away. "If Ethan wants the center of the room, let him stand there with the truth." Ethan's face went pale, but this time he did not step back. Adrian saw the change the moment it happened. Fear remained. Shame remained. But beneath both, something steadier began to rise. Ethan lowered his hand from the claiming mark and turned to face the pack himself. "I did redirect money," he said. Gasps moved through the crowd. The matriarch smiled as if she had won. Ethan continued before that smile could settle. "From the private celebration accounts." The garden quieted. "Every year, Mother increased the budget for my brother's public appearances. More flowers. More photographers. More gifts for donors. More things that made the family look generous without changing anyone's life." His voice shook, but it carried. "I moved part of it to the relief funds when families lost homes after the flood, to medical aid after the warehouse fire, to scholarships for the children whose names were never important enough for the newspapers." Noah stared at him, tears gathering silently. Ethan looked at him. "I never used your name to hurt you. I used what they spent on your image to do the work they claimed you represented." The matriarch's expression twisted. Theft dressed as virtue. Adrian finally turned toward her. "No. Evidence." He lifted the cedar box recovered from the burning archive. The duplicate ledgers show every transfer, every recipient, every result. Captain Hale opened the box and handed several records to the council elder. The elder read in silence. Then another. Then a third. No one spoke for a long time. At last, one elder lowered the page. "The funds were not stolen," he said slowly. "They were diverted from discretionary image accounts into verified emergency aid." Ethan closed his eyes, but the fear did not vanish. "I knew it was still wrong," he said. "I knew they would call it betrayal. But I couldn't keep watching people suffer while the family bought another spotlight." Adrian stepped closer. "That is the secret you were afraid of?" Ethan nodded. "If you claimed me, they would say you chose a thief." Adrian's expression softened, not with pity, but recognition. "Then they should have chosen better things to call charity." The first sound came from the back of the crowd. A woman from the flood district stepped forward, clutching a little boy's hand. "My son lived because of that aid." Another voice followed. "My workers ate because of those funds." Then another. "My sister's surgery was paid anonymously." One by one, people who had benefited from Ethan's hidden choices stepped into view. The garden transformed around him. What the matriarch had meant as disgrace became testimony. What Ethan had feared as exposure became proof. Noah walked to his brother and took his hand before everyone. "I stood in the spotlight," he said, voice breaking, "because you kept making sure it meant something." Ethan shook his head, tears slipping free. "You deserved your own life too. So did you." The words landed softly, but they completed something years had broken. Adrian looked at the council. "Now you know the final secret." He held out the claiming mark again. But this time he did not ask Ethan to take it in silence. Ethan Vale, I will not claim you because your name was first on a contract. I will not claim you because your brother stepped aside. I will not claim you because your family finally ran out of lies. He lowered his voice, though every person heard him. I choose you because when no one saw you, you still chose to see everyone else. Ethan looked at the mark, then at the crowd, then at the place where he had once stood at the edge of every room. For the first time, he did not search for a corner. He stepped forward, not dragged, not rescued, choosing. His fingers closed around the claiming mark with Adrian's, and the garden fell into a silence unlike any Ethan had known. Not the silence of erasure, not the silence of shame, the silence of an entire pack witnessing the truth and having nothing left to say against it. Adrian fastened the mark around Ethan's wrist. Noah stood beside them, not as the perfect brother being replaced, but as the brother finally free from perfection. The matriarch turned away first, but no one followed her. That was how her power ended, not with shouting, but with the absence of obedience. Weeks later, the claiming arch was rebuilt in the same grand hall where everything had begun. This time, no one stood at the service doors. No one placed Ethan near the wall. The family portraits were rehung with the painted spaces restored, including the photograph of two muddy boys beneath a young oak tree. Noah gave the opening speech and spoke honestly for the first time in public. He thanked Ethan by name. He thanked him not for disappearing, but for surviving the years when everyone benefited from his silence. Then Adrian entered from the far end of the hall. Every guest expected him to walk the ceremonial aisle alone. Instead, he stopped at the edge of the crowd where Ethan had once stood hidden, held out his hand, and waited. Ethan smiled through tears and walked with him into the center. The same room that once looked past him now turned fully toward him. And when Adrian publicly claimed the hidden Omega before every witness there, Ethan did not lower his eyes. He stood beside the Alpha who had seen him, beside the brother who had finally heard him, beneath a spotlight that no longer belonged to perfection. It belonged to truth.